just watch your P's and Q's because we're live on the internet on Facebook right now. So, hi everybody. Good morning. We're getting ready to rock the show. I got the two stars. Listen in. You ready to go? I'm ready. Darrin, Nathan. Good morning. You guys ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. I think Nathan's. Are you shaving, Nathan?
No, I'm packing up.
Where are you going?
Alabama.
Alabama. For a shoot?
Shoot and seeing some dealers.
Okay. All right. Well, here we go. We're going to rock the show. Here we go.
Yeah, my Lord, watch me sway. Darkness falls and we all pray. Hoping for the light of day. Down to the river.
All right, welcome to this week's edition of Hunting for X's, the podcast with Mr. Nathan Brooks and Darrin Christenberry, brought to you by the fine folks at Elite, Scott Archery, Custom Bow Equipment, Fletch Products, Winner's Choice Strings, and a whole bunch of other good partners. I got Darrin and Nathan on the line. Good morning, fellas.
Morning.
How y'all?
Good morning.
How y'all doing this fine Monday morning?
Running out of time.
Running out of time. All right. Well, we're streaming live today on Facebook Live, so we got those going. If you have a question for Darrin or Nathan, you should be able to comment. Just shoot me a question on the comments, and I'll ask the fellows for you. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about tuning broadheads. It's getting that time of year when people are getting ready to go out west, and we're going to start. A lot of states are going to start hunting their regular season September 15th, and I know in between there's going to be a lot of people chasing antelope, muleys, and elk. So it's that time of year for sure. Nathan, what shoot you going to?
Excuse me. Darrin and I are going to be at the Coleman ASA event. It's the classic. It's the final one for the ASA for the year.
Oh, there you go. That's exciting, huh?
They'll award Shooter of the Years, and it's the big finale for the ASA, and there's a lot going on there. Pretty busy event.
Man, the archery 3D season went fast, didn't it?
Yeah. Time flies. It's ridiculous. My wife and I had gone somewhere. We came home. I got back in town. We drove to town to get dinner one evening, and we were coming back down. And this is the main highway that I drive by every day of my life. And I looked over to the left, and I was like, holy smokes. And she's like, what? I said, look how big that corn is. And she's like, yeah, I mean, I literally looked over one day, and they were planting it. And then we drove by the other day, and it's 6 foot tall and all tasseled out. And I mean, it just in the blink of an eye, the whole summer went by, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Hey, Brad Tingley said to tell you congratulations on a couple great tournaments, Darrin.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's good. Thank you.
He hears you. We're doing it live. So, hey, if you got questions for Nathan or Darrin, just let me introduce Darrin and Nathan are two of the most well-respected professional archers in the industry. They've been around for a long, long time. And if you got any questions, we do this show every week for you. So if you have a technical question, we're going to talk a little bit about tuning broadheads. But last week we talked about fletchings and why they are so important for correcting or steering your arrows. You can always message me live here today, or you can always shoot me questions and I can ask the guys when we tape the show every Monday. And if you haven't heard the show before, you can listen every Monday. It's on several times on the Outdoor Call Radio app. So we've been doing this for almost 2 years now, so it's going great. Hey, Nathan, let's start with you because I know that you love broadheads. And Darrin likes shooting everything. So what do you, when you fixed heads, mechanicals, I was talking a little bit about arrow setups, and I've learned a lot from you guys just in the last year and a half over. Can you, first off, before we do anything, I get so many questions right now about FOC. Can you explain FOC and why people, if they need, what is so important about FOC on arrow builds?
Well, that's a good question, Dan. Target archers as a whole will probably say there's, and they've been versed in this, so that's probably the issue, is
people being versed in something rather than having actual real experience in understanding their issues. That being said, target world is probably like 7-8% as FOC. You hear that a lot. Hunting world, they want to say a little heavier, and really, all this boils back down to everything boils back down to one thing, and it's accuracy. So it is very possible to have extremely accurate arrows with FOCs ranging from almost 1 to 2% all the way up to 15-20%. So FOC is nothing more than basically it's your forward weight of center of the arrow. So if your arrow is 30 inches long, 15 inches in the middle, what percentage of that weight is in the front of the center of that arrow? And so you need weight in the front of the arrow to point the arrow in the right direction. But that being said, most of this information has been gathered throughout the years based on recurve shooting. And so when so many things were established many years ago, like tuning issues, if you were looking at, you can still look at tuning charts today that will give you a left tear, right tear, and it will tell you that it's a weak spine or a stiff spine. Well, that's not necessarily true with a compound bow.
Right.
Even though some of those things apply, it's not necessarily true. So with a recurve, those things are definitely true.
Okay. So is it?
But FOC is really just something that people are looking for. That again, in the hunting world, they've been exposed to people saying that the FOC is what creates broadhead accuracy. You need all this heavy weight in the front of the arrow to help penetration, to help accuracy, and all these sorts of things. And the reality is that's not exactly transparently true.
Okay.
Because there's too many things that are involved in that situation, and every scenario is a little different.
No, that makes sense. Darrin with all the different arrow manufacturers coming out now, with these different outsorts, instead of an insort, they got an outsort, especially on not the 246 diameter, but like the 166 diameter shafts. Is there anything that people, for the average bow hunter, for the average person that's wanting to get a good arrow set up to make sure they're properly spined, is there anything that they really need to pay attention to as far as an outsert or an insert, as far as giving them advantage on broadhead flight?
No, I don't think so. And I think, certain inserts, certain outserts can affect for lack of a better term, can affect the spine a little bit. If you're encasing a lot of that arrow, it's probably going to stiffen it up some and may affect the tune just a little bit. But I don't think there's anything to stay away from. But I think you should use a trusted source of information when you're trying to set stuff up. And these guys that want to shoot these 1,000 grain arrows with 60% FOC, I'm just making numbers up. It's just a Band-Aid. A great big heavy, fat, slow arrow will tune easier than something that's fast or has a little less FOC or is a little more critical to human error. There's so many factors and so many scenarios. Are there any rules? I won't say there's any rules because people are defying common knowledge all the time. But for the average guy or gal, they're, get a trusted source, utilize your shop. Don't get married to one source of information if you're getting your information from the internet, because some of those people, for lack of a better term, are just full of crap.
Yeah.
So that's just there's no rules. I won't say what I do is right. I won't say what someone else is doing wrong. But there are extreme measures that you don't need. Little bitty, great big airplane, little bitty wings doesn't work. Little bitty airplane with great big wings is just overkill. And I think that all applies to arrows. If you're shooting heavy point weight, you need enough wings or enough fletching on the back to guide it. If you're shooting really light point weight, you probably don't need as much fletching on the back to guide it. So there's a happy balance between all of that. There's a million factors. Use a trusted source. Find something that's going to work well for you, and you don't need to go to extreme measures to get good arrow flight.
Okay. Now you guys listen. You guys, if I say something that's out of bounds here, just tell me. But I was talking on the radio show in St. Louis last night, and I was talking about when this time of year, a lot of folks are really wanting to get their broadheads lined up and get the tightest groups that they can, so they know that when they put that pin up on that deer this year, that it's going to go where they need it to go. And I said a lot of the mistakes that I see when I travel and go to different camps is I see a lot of archers or a lot of bow hunters. Sometimes if they're having difficulty, I look in their quiver and they'll be shooting 340, 300 spine. I mean, they've got different arrows in their quiver, and I don't ever say anything unless they ask my opinion. But it's like, to me, it all goes to making sure that you're shooting the exact same setup every time. And I think it all when whatever arrow manufacturer you choose to go to, they all have arrow selection or arrow spine graphs or charts. And I always chart whenever I get new arrows, that's the first thing I do. I look up my draw length, my draw weight, I look up my arrow length, and what I'm going to put on the end of that arrow as far as grain weight. And then I go and find out the 3 or 4 selections of spines that they think is going to work with my setup. So I want it to be able to tune with my bow correctly. To me, that's one of the very first important things that you should do to before you start worrying about actually tuning your broadheads. To me, that's where it all starts. Now, am I off on that?
No, I think that's correct, and I don't. Oh gosh, it's loaded. Every time you say something, it's a loaded response. I don't think you can. I almost don't think you can go too stiff when it comes to an arrow. You can tune it. There are ways to get that thing to fly. Now, is it going to be optimum accuracy once you put a fixed blade broadhead on there? Yet to be determined. But you can get too weak. If you're flexing an arrow too much to where it could be very critical to human error and you could get some flexing inconsistencies when you're tuning, you'll pull your hair out trying to get a weak arrow to tune.
Yeah.
Can it be done? Yeah, but it will show every single flaw that you have in your form and execution. And I think that's probably first and foremost for people. If you take one arrow and knock it the exact same way every single time and shoot it through paper about 6 times, if you get 6 different holes, there's no sense in tuning your bow yet because you're doing something different every single time. That bow has no idea who's shooting it. That arrow has no idea who's shooting it, but it should do the exact same thing. Whether it's tuned or not, it should repeat. You should get the same hole every single time. And if you're not, you got to look at who's shooting the arrow first. Once you get your grip right, you get your pressures right, you execute shots correctly, and you get the same hole with that same arrow every time, then you can look at multiple arrows and tuning and broadhead tuning. Because, like I said, there's a million factors, and I'm not being critical. I'm just being, you got to be honest with yourself. If you're up there punching and gouging the trigger, you will struggle trying to get fixed blade broadheads to tune.
Or if you're torquing your bow on your grip, I mean that could be
just anything. Any inconsistency will show up when you're broadhead tuning.
Absolutely. Nathan, hey Pete, everybody say hi to Pete. Pete's watching us this morning. He says hi.
Hi Pete.
Good to see you, Pete. So when you got Nathan, Larry talked me into going to just a little bit heavier spine. I spined up when I went to my charts. So I started shooting a 300 spine. I'm only shooting 59 pounds, 58, 59 pounds. So I'm a little, probably just maybe a hair over spined. But I don't know why, but for whatever the case is, I'm getting really good, excellent fixed broadhead flight since I've done that, compared to where I was shooting it just with a little less spined arrow. Is there a specific reason for that?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so just think of it like this. When you launch an arrow out of your bow, and that arrow is flexing because they all have some sort of flex. When it flexes and you have a fixed blade broadhead on the end of that arrow, that fixed blade broadhead is catching air. So as it catches air, it's trying to steer the arrow it's reacting to the air that's hitting the broadhead and not allowing the fletching to turn the arrow and steer and guide the arrow. So the stiffer you get in theory, the stiffer you get, the less of that flex you're going to have on that arrow as it comes out of the bow. So if that arrow is flexing less and it's basically coming out perfectly straight and it's not flexing at all, that allows the fletching to steer and not the broadhead reacting to the air that it's catching and, taking the arrow off course.
Okay.
So yeah, there's the simple reason as why stiffer technically is better than weaker. And like Darrin said, there's a million scenarios here. But just in general terms, that's probably the easiest answer.
Okay. Let's. We got about 5-6 minutes left in the program, so the Hunting for X's show is about 20-25 minutes, folks. If this is the first time you've heard it, so real quickly, guys, fixed heads versus mechanical. So when you're broadhead tuning now, if you're shooting an Omnia or an Era or a Cure or an Encore, any of those bows, we've got something called set technology on those elite bows that you can really fine-tune your broadheads with like never before. Now, guys, if someone's not shooting an elite bow, what's the modus operandi for them to broadhead tune?
Depends on the bow. I mean, if they're shooting a Hoyt with a yoke system, you can twist yokes to change your tune. You also have, bows with adjustable roller guards or cable rods. Obviously, arrow rest position. There's a lot of things you can do. There are some, simplified versions of tuning with Bowtech's bow and their deadlock system, elite with the set technology. But if your bow is an older bow, anything with a split yoke, you can use twist yokes to change lean. You can shim cams on axles to change a lot. I mean, it just depends on the bow, but you have a lot of solutions at your fingertips, but most of them will require a bow press, and I know not everybody's got a bow press at home, so you're depending on somebody else to do your work for you.
Yep.
And if that's the case, it can be time consuming.
So for someone that's just starting out, or they've been bow hunting for a few years, instead of chasing their broadheads with their pins, with their sight, moving their sights and stuff, it's always a better fix to do what you just said, right, Darrin?
I think so. I think if you tune that, if you get your bow, because I mean, even if you can get a bow shooting what you think is a perfect paper tear. I mean, I've shot arrows through bows still to this day, and I shoot them, I'm like, man, that's money. That's a perfect tear. If you bear shaft tune, a bear shaft's going to react just like what a fixed blade broadhead's going to do. So, and again, this is a whole other can of worms. We could get into bear shaft tuning, but it's a very good tell. If you do bear shaft tune with the flet shaft, it's going to react like a fixed blade broadhead will. So if you've got access to that information or that type of tuning, it makes your life easier with, your yokes, your shims, whatever way it is, whatever way you have to fix the problem.
What about adjusting your poundage up or down?
You can. I mean, you can. And I mean, if you have a really stiff arrow and you're trying to change it some, increase your poundage. If you've got a borderline weak arrow, you're probably going to want to reduce your poundage. It will help with your tune. There's a lot, because you're adjusting how much that arrow bends when it leaves the bow.
Right.
So obviously, poundage is the number one effect on how much that arrow bends.
Yeah. So, but if you go back in the beginning, like when we first started the show, and get the correct spine set up for you shouldn't have to worry about doing that process. So that takes one little thing out of it there.
It'll help a bunch. And I mean, the biggest factor that I could give people, or the biggest inconsistency, is the human error part. I mean, people that just bow hunt, I'm not being critical, don't get me wrong. A lot of guys get their bow out 2 weeks before season. They shoot at a pie plate or whatever their target is, and they're good to go. They probably have some inconsistencies in their form, but you get a target archer that shoots indoors in the winter, 3D through the summer, they're ready to go during hunting season. Their consistency in their form and their flaws are probably that's a smaller window of error for someone that shoots year-round. A guy that picks his bow up a couple weeks before season, he's going to fight some tuning issues unless his bow is tuned perfectly for him. So it's all relative to experience, and I would think if you're really struggling, work on you, and that makes the tuning process a lot simpler.
Absolutely. Hey, Nathan, anything you want to add to that?
No, other than the thing that Darrin said about bare shaft tuning, I totally agree. Bare shaft tuning is by far the best method of getting your broadheads and fill points and everything shooting all the same. All that being said, the number one thing is really what Darrin said about work on you, because if you're trying to bare shaft tune and you can't put two fletched arrows at 20 yards together, regardless how the bow is tuned, regardless whether you're shooting broadheads or fill points, if you can't put 2 or 3 arrows at 20 yards in at least an 1.5 inch circle consistently, don't try bare shaft tuning, because you have to be very consistent to do that and to get the right results. And there's also a million things that can go into bare shaft tuning that can complicate these things too. But that being said, I would 100% agree with Darrin. That is the best way to figure out how your fixed blade broadhead is going to hit compared to your fill point.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get into broadheads at another show, folks. If you got a topic that you want Darrin and Nathan to discuss, just message me on the show here on the live, or you can always just go to the Outdoor Call radio page and message me there. And you can also go to the outdoorcallradio.com. That's the website for the network, and you can just shoot me the question, and I'll bring it up to the guys. And we'll probably start taping these on Facebook Live for a few shows, just so we get introduced to everybody. If you haven't heard or seen the show before, I've learned a ton of stuff. I've been bow hunting 30-something years, and doing the show with Darrin and Nathan every week for the last 1.5 years here on the network, I've learned a ton. So let me know what you guys want to talk about, and we'll get those out there. Hey, next week is since you got this is the last shoot for the season for IBO and ASA.
No, we'll come home Sunday evening, and then I'll be home like Monday, and then I head to very north tip of West Virginia, Cacapon. I think it's Cacapon, Cacapon State Park, for the IBO World Championship the following week.
Okay, and is that the conclusion of the season?
That will be the conclusion for 3D season.
Okay, well, in the next couple shows, then we'll just kind of do a recap of the season, and we'll get the highlights and lowlights from you guys, and we'll do that. Does that sound like a good topic?
Sounds good.
Yeah,
works for me.
All right. Anything you guys want to throw out there before we say goodbye?
Try to stay cool. It's hot outside.
It is. It's been hot. Yeah. Nathan, make sure you get your jammies packed.
Yeah, I've got it all ready. I got to go see several dealers in Alabama, and then I'll wind up at the ASA tournament. But looking forward to a good week.
Yeah, there you go. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Hunting for X's, the podcast with Mr. Nathan Brooks and Darrin Christenberry. Darrin, if someone's got a question or if they want to send you an email, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Facebook and Instagram. I'm Darrin Christenberry on both, and if they need to send me an email, it's dchristenberry@toglc.com.
All right, how about you, Nath?
Nathan Brooks Archery on Facebook and Instagram, and nbrooks@toglc.com. Need to email.
All right, there you go, guys. This is Outdoors Dan. That's going to wrap it up for this edition for Hunting for X's, the podcast with Mr. Nathan Brooks and Darrin Christenberry, brought to you by the fine folks at Elite Scott Archery, Custom Bow Equipment, Flex Fletch Products, and Winner's Choice Strings. We'll see you next time right here on Hunting for X's. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching us on the Facebook stream. I'm going to say goodbye to you. Say goodbye, fellas.
Goodbye. Goodbye, fellas.
We'll see y'all later. Thank you. And